I'm Sarah Kirk-Hanley, Executive Director of Manhattan Graphic Center. Our events are made possible in part by grants from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the Sherman Foundation, the Pierre and Tana Matisse Foundation, and our supporters. Thank you. MGC's online artist talks under COVID-19 are made possible with funds from the NISCA Electronic Media Film in partnership with Wavefarm Media Arts Assistance Fund with the support of Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. This evening, we are delighted to welcome Stephanie Santana, a textile artist, fine art printmaker, and designer based in Brooklyn, New York. Through the use of archival family photographs and documents, often dating from the era of Jim Crow and the American Civil Rights Movement, her work explores themes of interiority, identity, and cultural preservation. Employing printmaking, embroidery, and quilting techniques that connect her work to a lineage of Black women, artists, and makers, Santana's textiles exist in a dialogue with personal and collective histories, traversing the space between memory and the physical evidence of Black life. Santana is a founding member of Black Women of Print and currently serves as their communications director. Her work has exhibited nationally and is currently held in both private and public collections, including the Getty Research Institute and the Smith College Museum of Art. Additionally, her work has been featured in publications such as Pressing Matters, Printmaking Today, Shadow, and SPOOK Magazine. Her animated illustrations are featured in the film An Oversimplification of Her Beauty, the Criterion Collection, and official selection of the 2012 Sundance Film Festival. Before we begin, I would like to share a few guidelines about tonight's event. Chat is enabled for all, but please use it judiciously to share pertinent insights and comments about the work. Stephanie will be discussing family history, and those who are familiar with the images are welcome to chime in via chat. Questions about Stephanie's life, career, and philosophy should be submitted to the Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And we will address those questions during open discussion following Santana's presentation. You will find, as I said, everything at the bottom of your screen. And now, please welcome Stephanie Santana.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you to Manhattan Graphic Center for hosting this space for the Black Women in Print Speaker Series and all of us to share a little bit more about our work. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned, I am a textile artist and designer, and I kind of, started off with more of a non-linear path in textile arts. So I wanted to kind of kick things off by talking a little bit more about my artistic influences. So Faith Ringgold, she was really a huge influence on my work from the beginning. I, started out watching, reading her book Tar Beach from the time I was a kid, and my parents had I think it was the exhibition poster that was in our dining room, and it was just something that I always interacted with and saw. It was a story quilt, and a little bit of background on that. I wanted to highlight this piece in particular. So this is Change One, Faith Ringgold's More Than 100 Pounds Weight Loss Performance Story Quilt from 1986. And this wasn't the first one that she made, but this was an earlier quilt of hers. And just a quote about this that I wanted to reference. She said, with the photographs, Faith made up a series of collages representative of each decade of her life from the 1930s to the 1980s. And printed them on linen. She then wrote a narrative about the role that each that eating had played in her life in each of these decades and printed them on adjoining squares on linen. So out of the text for the first change quilt came a performance piece that would document her effort to lose weight. And this is change 2. So this is the one that she did 2 years later in 1988. And I love about this one, the thing that I love about it is that it's a little bit more playful. You can still see that she incorporated some photographs from her throughout her life, but you can also see that she incorporated painting back into it, which is also, I'm sure a lot of you know, very well known as a painter. And you can see the patterns and sort of the techniques that she incorporated into it. And for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Faith Ringgold's background, she was raised by Willie Posey, her mother, who was a fashion designer in Harlem. And, you know, so she was just always around these beautiful fabrics. And I think her mother kind of was the one to teach her these quilting techniques. So Faith said, the reason why I began making quilts is because I wrote my autobiography in 1980, and I couldn't get it published because I wanted to tell my story. And my story didn't appear to be appropriate for African-American women. That's what I think, and that's really what made me so angry. So she was kind of saying with this that, you know, she saw a need for her to tell her own story in her own voice because she wanted to kind of take her her story around and have it published and kind of talk about how she became an artist in her career, you know, because by that point, I think she would have been almost in her 50s. And she said, you know, if no one's going to allow me to tell my story, I'm going to tell it myself. And I think that's incredible. So that's one of the main inspirations behind me wanting to kind of reclaim those narratives as part of Black Women in Print, and also the work that I'm doing as a textile artist. And then this Lois Mailou Jones is another major influence. So this is I love this picture of her. She's in her studio in Paris in the 1930s. And I would say she was one of the first Black textile designers that I was aware of, where I really said, you know, this is something that I could look to, or a blueprint for me to sort of follow this path as a career, which is when I was starting to research more about textile design. And this is a beautiful design. I just love her use of color. This is a design that she made in 1928. And then later on, I found out that she didn't really continue to pursue that path in terms of textile design. She sort of went more into the realm of painting and education. She was a professor at Howard University. And then of course, Gordon Parks is a major influence of mine. I think one of the things I love so much about Gordon Parks is that there's just so much compassion in his photographs. And he did a lot of different things in his career, from filmmaking and different kinds of photography. But, you know, of course, he's really well known for his photojournalistic work. And these two photos are from a series that was published in Life magazine in September 1956. It was a photo essay called The Restraints, Open and Hidden. And he was just documenting the lives of one extended family in in the rural South under Jim Crow segregation. But I think there's just so much beauty in these photos, especially the fact that he made a point to photograph them in color, which, you know, from my understanding, color film was very expensive back then, but I think he probably made a point to say, like, it's important to bring these photos to life and really capture things as they are. So, you know, when I see these photos, I think a lot of my family members and just our history and collective history as well. So I wanted to dive a little bit into process. As I said, I studied textile design, and this was one of the pieces that I made that kind of got me thinking a little bit more about different ways that I could apply designs onto a surface. And the way that I made this was I cut out different shapes using black construction paper and then sort of arranged them, scanned them into Photoshop, and then put them into Repeat. And I did a lot of things with this. I started playing with dyes, and, you know, like I know some of you that have probably printed with natural dyes, it's a little tricky. So this was not with that. This was, with a semi-transparent water-based ink. So yeah, I just enjoyed making these. I made a few of them and then I said, you know what, I think I want to try doing something else. And this is again with like semi-transparent ink and opaque ink, just sort of playing with different layering techniques. So I went on from that, and then this is a picture of me working in the studio at Textile Art Center, which has been really influential in my journey as an artist as well. But this piece on the right is a picture of, well, the two pictures that I use for this, the two photographs that I use are in the background right here. This is my mom, and I believe this was a picture from her either junior or senior year at Spelman College. And she had given me like the little wallet-sized photograph years before, and I still have it with me. And I've taken it to different, places that I've lived. And I was kind of like, it's so small. I want to see what I can do in terms of scaling it up and seeing different ways that I can preserve it. Because I just had this feeling like it's going to continue to deteriorate over time. And then in the foreground, this is her holding me when I was a baby. So this shows, two different stages of her life. Of course, it doesn't encompass all of who she is, but I think when I made this, I was thinking about my own journey as a mother as well. I have a 5-year-old son who's probably watching this right now. So he's probably like, Mom, he's talking about me. But yeah, he's been a big influence in my, and just the way that I think about things. And so I think I was just trying to connect back to my own mother's experience. So the process that I'm working on developing right now is just I generally start with the research and the photo editing, and then I do burn the images on the screen and print them myself. And then, I usually hand dye or source fabric. I've been working a lot with Kona cotton, quilter's cotton, which comes in a lot of different colors. So it just depends on how I'm feeling about the particular piece or the time that I have to create it. Then I usually screen print on top of that. I've been experimenting with monoprinting as well with intaglio inks, which is kind of experimental because, it took weeks for them to dry, but by the time they dried, I was like, as long as I don't wash it, it's fine. And then applique and collage sometimes incorporated, and then doing like hand embellishments with painting and embroidery, quilting, trimming and finishing. So this is just, a stack of some found cloth that I was working with, and then, a few of the pieces I was working on. And this is a close-up of another quilt that I was doing. Okay, so just, a little video. Oh, Sarah, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Oh,
I was going to say, I love that image of the layered fabric. It just kind of says a lot about the way you think and, the layer, the way you layer images and media and techniques.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was taken on the yardage table, which I spend a lot of time there printing. So yeah, that was just a little clip showing, how I adjust the levels in the photo to kind of get, bring out the darks and bring out the contrast a little bit before I can translate it into a halftone image. And then this is, like I was just referencing the yardage table, this is me printing on it. I always make sure that I pin everything down and iron it ahead of time so that, there's no debris in the print, because that's messed up a few prints before. So I think this was over this past summer that I did this. And
this is at the Textile Art Center?
Yeah, this is a Textile Art Center here in Brooklyn. So yeah, it's the water-based ink. And that was one of the photos that, it's actually the same photo that I showed in the video previously. So you'll see when the screen comes up off the table. So There it is. Okay. Okay. The music is a little loud, but this is just. So I think you get the idea. But that is a liquid acrylic that I was experimenting with. So obviously I have to heat set the ink first, which I usually just do in the dryer for about 45 minutes, and then painting over it. And I kind of rinsed it out a little bit, and it has, you know, sort of a tie-dye look to it when it's finished. So that's been kind of fun. So that's actually the same. You can see here that it's much darker, but you know, by the time you get through with it, it's a lighter color. And so this is a piece that I was working on where I did the liquid acrylic, and then I screen printed. So this right here is another screen printed layer that I drew the film myself with a marker. So it has a little bit of texture to it, which is nice. And then did some embroidery and then quilting on top of that. And the embroidery is all by hand. And just, you know, some more techniques that I'm playing with a little bit. So you can see I use the transfer pen over here for the squares that I was working on, and just I just love doing hand embroidery. I love things that are tactile, so that's been fun to play with. And then playing with the monotypes, I've been doing those on paper and fabric as well. So this right here is monoprinted as well, and then this is a screen printed piece, and I stitched them together with the sewing machine. So that's the full image of the piece, which I have different versions of that one. So, and then, yeah, a little bit more about the space where I'm working. So this is Textile Art Center. As I mentioned before, they've been really instrumental in my journey because I first started out, I think, well, they've been around over 10 years, but I started out taking classes in screen printing, natural dyes. They offer all kinds of different classes. So before I started really, you know, diving more into my practice and renting out studio space there just to have a place to work, I really, you know, enjoyed just taking classes there and being there. And this is on the right here is the gallery space that they have. And this is, you know, an image of a piece that I was working on the table. And that's my studio space. So.
So you have your own dedicated studio area there?
Yeah, and they also have an artist in residence program. So there are, I think, usually about 8 artists in residence per year that have little booths where they can work as well. So yeah, it's a really community focused space, which is great. So this image here is of my mom on the right and my aunt on the left. And it's one of my all-time favorite photos of them. I grew up seeing it in the house, and I think the thing it really captures to me is just their personalities and just their joy. This was a picture, I spoke to my mom about this photo, and she said they took classes at the Y in Dallas, Texas, where they were raised. And this was just like, you know, I think they're, well, I know that my grandfather took the photo, and he was a educator and photographer in their community in Dallas. He was an educator for over 40 years, as well as a, you know, just somebody that really captured a lot of moments. Like I think he had a whole album that I saw once of school dances that he took photos of, and just, you know, the kids dressed up in all their finery. So yeah, I wanted to work with this photo just because it just represents joy and their like vibrant personalities to me. But the thing that my mom, oh, sorry, you're on mute again.
It says I can push spacebar, but it's not working.
Oh.
Anyway, I love the smiles on their faces. It's just, you're right, just full of joy, and it makes me smile to see them. It's a wonderful photograph.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing that she was saying too, my mom was saying that, you know, in those days, it was just something recreational to do. It wasn't like, you know, this was something that was going to be a career move. So she just was like, you know, it was a fun thing to do. And, you know, I think they did it for a few years. She said that she even got to the point of being on point and showed me a photo of that. So that was kind of fun to hear. But this was the first print that I made with this photo. And the interesting thing about, I'll go back a little bit. You can see a little bit of the difference in the just the shading of the photo. And the reason is because when I first made the image that I was going to use to screen print, it was like a photo of a photo of a photo. So it was a photocopy, I believe, of the original photo, which is only about this big, a few inches by a few inches. And then I think I took a photo of that with my iPhone, and then I think I put like a bad Instagram filter on it or something. And then, like, you know, I was trying, I think because I'm so far away from my family, I was just using something that I had available, which was this photo of a photo of a photo. And it kind of worked in a way because this was supposed to be influenced by the printmaker, the Cuban printmaker Belkis Sayon's work, because this was printed for the Black Women of Print's inaugural portfolio continuum back in 2019. And we were, you know, her work, which I would highly recommend looking up if you're not familiar with it, but she just has these beautiful colograph prints, and just her work is a little bit more dark and moody. So I think that it kind of worked out in a way. And she actually has a piece that has this negative space here with the orange surrounding it. But after I'd done that piece, I said, you know what, I want to go back and get a better image from that and try to bring out more of the detail. So that's what I did with this one, which I titled Wendell's Daughters, which is my grandfather's name. So that was their father. And this one was screen print on hand-torn paper with watercolor pigment. So the pink line around it, I painted all of those by hand. And that was printed in an edition of 7 with 1 artist proof. So the image that I originally showed in, you know, 2 slides ago, that was an iPhone photo that I took of the original photo, which I actually was able to see in my great aunt's scrapbook. So it's, you know, I think my process is kind of, I like to work with the same image over and over again because I feel like it gives me a little bit more of the understanding of it each time that I work with it. There's more that I can notice about it. And this is the same image, but I did this on cotton with hand embroidery. So this was just, you know, experimenting with embroidery and bringing the image together with that, which was really fun. And this is living room study 1. So this image, I spoke to my mom about it, and she said that this was probably a trip that she and my aunt and, well, this is my Aunt Janet and my great aunt, who her name was Mildred, but we call her Aunt Bootsy. And she believes this was taken in Terrell, Texas, which is a small town not too far from Dallas, where a lot of my family is from. A lot of my ancestors are from. And this was probably a trip that they took when Aunt Bootsy was living in Seattle. And she came to visit. My mom said she probably took the train all that way because, you know, folks weren't necessarily flying at that time. So I was just like, wow, it's a long journey to take a train from Seattle to Dallas or Seattle to Terrell. But, you know, you can see that they're all sitting on the couch having a conversation. And then I also have the piece here because I just wanted to give you a sense of the scale, to give you all a sense of that. Yeah, this is a screen print acrylic hand embroidery on hand-dyed quilted cotton textile. And then this is just a detail shot to give you more of a close-up. And like I said, you know, I really enjoy working with the same image and seeing what sort of different things come about, because it's not, to me, always about the finished product. It's about the process of it, and just exploring with the lines and the textures of it. So this was another study that I did where I only used a portion of it, and I wanted to see how the image would change, or how, you know, how the feeling of it would change if you don't see what she's looking at. And then this one is, you can see that these are the original photos from the scrapbook. That's what this background is right here, or the photo album. And this one was taken in Terrell, Texas. That's what the handwriting says. It says Terrell, Texas, Train Depot, 1954. And this is another one that I kind of grew up seeing a lot of, and we always kind of had conversations about it as a family, and just said, like, who's this back here? Like, who's this person? Because our thought, our feeling was always that this is somebody who appears to be white. We don't know for sure, but it's just interesting that this person is in the colored section, which would not have been necessarily tolerated were it with the other way around. So in talking to my mom about this, she always said, you know, it wasn't that this was necessarily a political statement that was trying to be made when my grandfather made this photograph. It was more that he was just trying to capture the moment, and this was just what was happening at the time. But right here is, you know, it's my mom again on the left, and my great aunt Bootsy and my aunt Janet on the right. But yeah, it's just interesting to kind of look back and see this photo and see that you know, that was a part of what was going on at the time. So the way that I wanted to work with that photograph in particular, this is something I'm still working on, but just, I think what was interesting about seeing those parts of the photograph where it says, you know, you're in the colored section and this is, you know, there's a person in the background, is, I think the way that my mom speaks about it is as if those are things that you sort of just had to block out for survival purposes. So you just had to kind of ignore those certain things in the day-to-day. But although you may try to do that, it's still present, and it's still one of the first things that you see in that photo. So I was kind of thinking about manipulating that image a little bit and covering that part, or covering those parts of the photograph that were always a topic of conversation with fabric, and just seeing what happens with that. And the fabric happens to be a little sheer, so it's interesting to see that even though you try to block that out, it's still something that comes through in the photograph. So this is just an image of me, you know, screen printing it, and then putting the cotton on an applique.
Yeah, I think that yellow really kind of reflects the psychic space that is absent there. You know, it's so blaring and glaring, yet you don't see it. You're trying to block it out. But the fact that you asked your mother and she said, "Oh, we didn't even notice," you know, it's just a part of the landscape at the time, and everyone was inured to it, is, you know, shocking in today's context.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, in certain ways, there's still some of that going on. I would say that, you know,
True.
I think
True enough.
Yeah, we go back and forth between how much of this do I want to sit with, and how much do I want to just say, okay, I need to kind of compartmentalize certain things in order to survive. So, I'm sorry. Do you hear a background noise? I'm sorry.
I hear maybe a phone ringing, but it's not distracting. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. So this image right here is of my Aunt Bootsy in 1961. And I believe this was taken, it says it was taken in Golden Gardens, which I have to, part of my process that I'm working on now is just researching a little bit more about the story behind a lot of these photos. But this photo was, you know, taken during an activity that she enjoyed a lot, which was being outdoors and camping. And so this is just a favorite photograph of mine. And this one is titled We've Been Here 2020. This is a 2-color screen print on paper. And it was published for the Dream Deferred Portfolio Exchange, which was an exchange that I did with, I think, about 30 other artists. And we created these prints sort of in response to a lot of the protests that were going on at the time, because this was in this past summer 2020. And the thing that was really sort of the response that I had was, the question was posed, you know, what is your response to these protests going on, or what are your response? And of course, those have really affected all this deeply. But I think a feeling for me as well was that as Black women in particular, it's not necessarily our job to do a lot of the work required, you know, in terms of, like, we're already doing a lot of the work. So I was just like, you know, this stuff has been going on, and while it's had a great impact, it's, you know, I think we also need to prioritize rest. And so that's really what this was about for me, was saying, you know, we've already been here, and sometimes, you know, this is not the time to ask us to do more work and more labor, you know? So, and this is a piece that I made of Aunt Bootsy in 2020 as well. Screen print applique on quilted fabric. So this was a photo taken of her in 1963. And I think another thing that I'm sort of thinking about is filling in some of the details visually. And so I sort of filled in her shoes and just sort of placed this on a more stark background to kind of comment on the duality that we often, or it's sort of the code switching, or the things that happen with Black women in particular, where we have to play all these different roles and exist in these different spaces. So that was sort of the focus of this piece. And these last two are two of my favorite photographs. Again, this is actually my grandfather who made a lot of these photographs, Wendell Long. And here he's cutting a baby's hair. I think these were family friends. And then again, this is my mom and aunt. They were out shopping, and my mom was telling me, you know, like, that was my favorite dress. It's amazing how much detail she can recall, but she was saying that was her blue and white seersucker dress with red sleeves. And she told me, you know, those were comic books that she had gotten when they went to buy shoes in Dallas. So yes, I'm starting to work a little bit more with digital illustration to sort of plan out the colors and the composition of prints that I make. So I feel like the digital illustrations can live by themselves as well, but it's also something that helps me sort of bring the color to life. So that's it. Thank you.
Right, Stephanie, can you go back to that other slide just before this one? I was wondering if you could talk more about that pattern behind your mother and your aunt there. Can you talk more? Is there a meaning behind that, or is that more of a graphic, just a purely graphic or abstract image?
That particular image it's sort of representative of how I think of photographs, which is as portals to a different time. So that's something I've begun to play a little bit more with, is just having like a visual where you can sort of hone in on it and sort of get lost in the image. So yeah,
I think it really helps obviously draw the eye to the two faces, and I thought there may be something there about that image, about that. It's almost like a whirl of a fingerprint. You often talk about history and individuality and people's stories, and it kind of evoked those thoughts for me. But it's good to
Right.
hear that more you were thinking of a portal into time, which I can see too, or even like trees rings or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Into it, like time, the passage of time and the growth
right.
of a life. So yes, I think we're ready to take questions, and I have a few I'll kick off with from the audience. It looks like we have one from Alicia or
Mhm.
Alicia. I'm not sure how to pronounce. Thank you for explaining the different processes that you use. Beautiful work. I love the image outside the Terrell building. Very poignant. Do you use intaglio plates just on paper or on fabric as well? If you use them on fabric, what sort of inks do you use?
Well, right now I've been using the Akua plate, just the basic plate that you use with the intaglio ink, and I've been using jelly plates for paper. And then yeah, I use the Akua ink, the intaglio ink. Thank you for that question.
And keep them coming. I'm going to ask a few. What's the relationship between your interests in textiles and printmaking, and how, I think we saw how they come together in the final work, but how do you think of them in relationship to one another as separate techniques?
I think I sort of think of them as working together because to me they're not really separate. I learned printmaking primarily through printing on textiles. So yeah, I think it's just a process for me where I continue to layer different techniques on top of each other, and it becomes sort of meditative and iterative because, you know, each time I work with the photograph, I see something different in it.
Mhm.
So,
And in your recent interview with Pine Copper Lime, you talk about being an archivist of your family's history and how these photographs come to you sometimes just on your phone and you want to kind of preserve them.
right.
Wonder if you could talk a little more about that.
Sure. I think, like I was saying, you know, with my son and my family, I think I'm really starting to want to create something that's more of a legacy for him, to have, you know, as time goes on. I think the history is so rich, and it's important to have those things, you know, available later on. You know, because I think for me, textiles and photographs and anything that's a physical object, it's going to be around, versus, you know, we have all these photographs on our phone or documents on our phone, and I've lost things on devices, and it's not a pleasant experience. So yeah, I think it's the more that we can preserve these things, you know, it'll continue on for generations to come. And I also, like I was saying, I am focusing more on getting a lot of the backstory behind the photos, because when I first started, it was more of an experimental thing where I was just like, oh, you know, I want to see what this looks like scaled up, or really explore just having, like, really honing in on the details of each photo. But now that I've gotten a little further along with it, I'm really focused on just interviewing family members that remember these times, like interviewing my mom and my aunt, and hearing their backstories, and extended family members as well.
Well, that segues into another question. Is all of your work, this is from Jean Betancourt, is all of your work based on family photos?
More of my recent work, yes. Not all of it has been in the past, but more of my recent work, yes. But I think as I go on, it's going to broaden, and not just be family photos, because I think there's so many experiences and things that are happening right now that can be documented.
Yes. And you have your own family that your, you know, current family photos, I'm
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Not, of course, this is your family. I meant your son and your
Mhm.
husband.
Yeah.
There are a couple comments about your sense of color. People are really reacting to these vivid and your distinct color palette. Can you talk about how you developed your sense of color and how you choose colors for the final product?
Mm, thank you. I mean, I think that just comes from my design background and just studying color. You know, I'm always kind of collecting little fabric scraps and, you know, saving things on Instagram or whatever I see that kind of draws my eye. I think I do get really drawn to earth tones as well as just bright colors that sort of pop. And that, I don't know, that could just also be, you know, being a child of the 80s and 90s, like there's just bright colors everywhere. So, yeah, but I think the feeling behind it is just, I feel like color is something that can draw you in. So I think there's always a sense of mood attached to it. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of potential with color.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be part of your layering process. You know, it's one, and you, as we saw in that earlier image of, I am not recalling the title at the moment, of on the couch with your mother and aunt and grandmother on the couch, and you know it had the embroidery and the various layers in it. So can you talk about how that layering process informs the final narrative that you're developing from that image?
Yes. So
Or similar images that you've made?
I'm sorry, can you say the question again? I think I missed the last part of it.
Similar images is just your general process of this layering of color and the photograph, and then maybe some stitching or quilting, and what you also have talked about how quilting has influenced you not only with Faith Ringgold, but I think in another discussion we had, you mentioned the Gee's Bend quilters, and the history that quilting represents as a family heirloom kind of recalled there. So it seems to me that you've developed this process with all of these different thoughts in mind, and I wonder how conscious it is for you, or if it's a more intuitive process when you're layering all of these different aspects of the work.
I would definitely say it's much more intuitive. I have a general idea because I do purchase the inks and the fabric ahead of time, but I sort of just, it's a meditative process for me. So I kind of just let it develop over time. You know, I'll kind of work with the fabric and say, okay, I think I want to use this color of ink. And then, what colors am I going to select of thread? And I like to see how it sort of evolves. But I think that the digital illustrations that I have up here are a little bit more intentional because it's, I'm not using physical materials that, are quite frankly can be expensive. So it's like I can play around with the color a little bit more, which I like as well. But I think there's still something great about just sort of letting things develop naturally and organically with the way that I typically work with the physical materials.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about how you got involved with the Textile Art Center. How did that come about in the beginning?
Oh, just being here in Brooklyn, and I think I can't actually remember how I found out about them, but I think I just saw online that they were offering classes, and so I started going, and they were, they're just workshops that you can take over a series of weeks or for a few days. Of course, that was pre-pandemic times, and now they offer classes online mostly, which I actually plan to do a workshop coming up March 31st, which I can provide more information about. I'll have it on my Instagram page. But yeah, I just, it was just a really great way to sort of dip my toe in without doing an entire degree program at first. So I love that. And I love now that it's available more broadly because with everything being remote, people can take classes on Zoom. Like I think they've offered shishiko mending classes, dyeing classes, weaving. So there's a lot that I think I've been able to kind of pick up different techniques and see how I can combine them together through that sort of education. So yeah, I just love to kind of dive into things and try things out and see if I like them, because the quilting actually, I'm sure that I had families, family members that were quilters, but I didn't learn it directly from anybody in my family. I took a class at Textile Art Center and learned about it that way, and started incorporating it into my practice.
Okay. It seems like a wonderful center. I have to admit, being kind of in my head as a print focused person, I didn't know very much about it until we started talking, and I looked it up. It looks like a really wonderful facility, and
Right.
and has a great website, and I'd love to check it out more when I have the opportunity, but it does seem like a great place to work.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that you've mentioned in a few of your interviews and articles is that you see printmaking as an empowering medium, a way to take ownership of history. You mentioned that in the beginning, and how Faith Ringgold influenced you to do that with your own life story and your family's story. I think, to quote you, to be able to reproduce a message or an image independently means that we can spread our ideas more quickly. We can preserve what's meaningful to us in our own voice. In your recent images, we see the story of your own family history, as we've seen here, an excavation of the past. And where is this excavation taking you in your current work?
I think I was saying before that I really am finding different ways to preserve the stories behind the photographs. I think that's the next step, is really bringing, I have family members that have had, oral histories where they've had somebody interview them, and then writing those interviews down and kind of documenting everything that was said. And so I think that's going to start to coincide with the imagery as well for my practice. And then, yeah, I think I just want to continue contextualizing my work within history, and just sort of tying it back, because I think the thing that I would want to encourage folks to do is to do this work as well, because I think there's so many stories that families have, and I don't think it takes having a degree as an archivist, or having a formally being a formally trained archivist to do this work. It just takes caring about it. So that's where I kind of see going with that, and maybe finding ways to help other people document their family stories.
Thanks. And then we have a question that I think relates to that from Zaria Shin, which is, how do you preserve the work and the materials? I imagine as an archivist, you're cognizant of the archival nature of the materials you're working with. And I think that's the nature of the question. If not, let me know. So if, do you have that in mind as you're making it, using archival processes and inks?
Yeah, I think that is something that I'm constantly thinking about. But it's also a journey of me really learning what materials need to be used, and like how, because I've been using archival like textile boxes to preserve some of the work. But when I'm working with it, it doesn't go directly into the box. So it does take a little bit of time for me to get to that point, because I do want to kind of live with the work and enjoy it for a while. But yeah, especially, my paper prints, I'm always using archival paper and inks, and because I do, both paper and textiles.
I noticed on your website that some works are editioned, but it looks like the majority are unique works that you've made.
Yeah.
So the editioned works were the ones in the portfolios. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the edition
Mhm.
works are mostly on paper for now. And I think what I'm sort of building with the textile works is more of a varied variable edition. So I'm still figuring out how I want to sort of categorize everything, but it's, I do make multiples of the image. It's just each one is a unique work.
Right. A lot of artists these days work that way with printmaking, almost like a visual library, you know, or something where
Right.
they grab images from various parts of their work and put them together in unique ways. It looks like you're following that same general way of working. And I wonder, you know, so generally when you make an edition, it's because you've been asked to contribute something to a portfolio, at least for now.
Right, for now. Or I mean, particularly with the one that I did of my Bootsy, where, you know, that has the sort of like magenta color, We've Been Here, that was 35. So I don't ever do an edition that big. You know, in most cases, that was for the portfolio exchange, but I try to keep the edition smaller.
Okay. We are getting toward our hour here. We have a couple more general questions about, do you have anything coming up? I know I mentioned you have a full hour-long interview on Pine Copper Lime, which is from December 2020. It's episode 31. If anyone, or 71, excuse me. If anyone would like to listen to that, I really enjoyed it myself. Your work has been featured in various magazines and journals, including the current issue of Printmaking Today. And all of this, I believe, is on your website, but do you have any further information about things that we might not know about yet, you know, exhibitions you have coming up or things that coming down the pipeline?
I may have some more news soon, but at this point, that's about it. And then I will be sharing more information on the workshop that I'll be doing on March 31st. So that'll be forthcoming soon. Yes,
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And then there have been over all of these talks, and this is our 6th talk. The next one with the Black Women of Print members, the next one will be from the founder, Tanikia Ward. I always want to say Ward for some reason, Ward. And she, I think, will address a lot of the questions about how the group got started. We do have that question again. I believe it was her brainchild, and she probably recruited all of you, but if you'd like to say a few words about it, especially since you're the communications director.
Oh yeah.
You know, how you all worked together and how you came together.
Yeah, so we came together in 2018, which is when Tanikia founded it. You know, she was seeing that there was a need for the organization just in the printmaking space. So she, you know, reached out to all of us who became founding members. And the way that we have been working together up until this point is just, you know, a lot of moral support with each other throughout the, you know, the different things that we're doing individually, but we also hope to have a retreat, you know, coming up when that's possible, where we can start to, you know, collaborate more one-on-one, because a lot of us are in different places of the country, like Tanikia is in Milwaukee. A few of us are in like the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. And there's a few of us in Texas. So, you know, we did have plans for more in-person collaborative work that's kind of going to be postponed until that's a little bit safer to do. But yeah, I think just the big project that we did together was the Continuum portfolio. So that's, you know, there's going to be more portfolios forthcoming, as well as more educational programming. Yeah, so.
Right. And there's a lot of information about the group as a whole on your website. So I encourage those of you who are curious about the group to go to the website, blackwomenofprint.com, and learn more there and come to our talk with Tanikia Ward, which will be March 31st. And if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you so much, Stephanie, for your generous sharing your time with us tonight and your thoughts about your work and where it's going. And learn more about Stephanie on her website. And I think it was the next slide, if you want to pull that up.
Oh yeah, sure.
People can follow you on Instagram or Black Women of Print as well, and the Textile Art Center, and learn more about Stephanie on her website. We, as I said, hope you will all join us for our final talk with the Black Women of Print next month. To be informed about details of these talks, please join MGC's mailing list, which you can do on our website, or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Manhattan Graphic Center. And thank you all and for joining us, and have a great night.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.